They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking...
Hi, this is Nikolai, and you're listening to my dad, Rafal, co-host James Jardine, and featuring Mr. Jim Tiller on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Plug in, listen up, and enjoy.
Deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were happy.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down to Security Rabbit Hole to another edition of your favorite cybersecurity podcast. Welcome down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is Raph. The cadre from last week, episode 713, is back for part 2, and we're closing it out with a banger. So grab your notebook, get a quiet spot, grab your coffee, because here we go. Okay, so welcome back for part 2. And as I said at the end of the last section, I want to talk about how we're going to take this problem we've identified between marketing, education, and then, what technology can do. And let's switch gears, because I think we all agreed, like, this isn't an inherent problem with the technology. Technology marches forward. It presents us with opportunities to enhance our lives and make things better for both attackers and defenders. It's always a double-edged sword. So how do we take AI as it exists today, whether we're talking about one of the frontier models, whether we're talking about open source? Maybe we should discuss that. How do we apply that rationally to cyber to give ourselves, I don't want to say advantage, because I think that may be the wrong way to couch it, but like to improve our situation in the SOC? Dan, let me start with you, because I think you probably have the most seat time trying to explain this.
Yeah. I've actually got a way I've been thinking about this. So I love the fact that security is like a combination word from Latin. It's se and cura, which is like without and worry. So it's like the job of security to make the receiver relax and not panic, right? And being ex-military, I just hate being surprised. Surprise is a bad thing. So when I think about what a SOC is, and more generally a security program, I've always thought of that as a collection of questions. I have questions about the world that I want to be asking continuously. I want to know, who are the current threat actors? What are they currently doing? What tools do they use? What are their IOCs? What are their TDPs? Those are all questions. I have hundreds of them, that make up my security program. The challenge with having hundreds of those when the whole world is like moving constantly and changing constantly is the asking the questions is difficult enough. Going and actually querying data sources to bring back the answers to them and combine them all together, that's difficult enough. And then actually parsing them and figuring out if we need to take some action. So it's this giant list of questions. Then it's taking action as a result if we do find something. Yes, so-and-so actor is targeting medical device companies, which we are one of. And they have IOCs. And yes, we did find them on the network. So we're going to go take action. Okay, cool. You want to take action? You want to do that constantly, without end, at scale on a massive network? Well, cool. Do you have a 4,000 person security company or security org inside your company? And the answer is no, we have 32, or we have 7, or we have 9, or whatever. So the way I think about AI helping here is it can help you ask the questions. It can help you gather the response to the question, right? Gather the answer, collapse that in with your context of what you're trying to protect. And it could also help you take action. So if you know the questions you're supposed to be asking, and you're able to gather and nurture those questions, and you also know the types of actions that you would take, well, now you just forget about tech, you have a set of questions and actions that make up your program. Start there. That is universal. That's before we even had any tech. I have questions and I have actions I want to take as a result of the answers. And now the way I think of AI is it's a whole bunch of eyes, it's a whole bunch of little mini brains, and a whole bunch of little hands. So now our org is whatever, 50,000 security people large instead of 7 or 9 or 12.
I am shocked to be even more optimistic on AI than Daniel. I never imagined being in that position. But I want to add one tiny thing to this if I can. I think that for people who genuinely don't know what they want and what they have, there are still use cases for AI in guiding them to discover it, in plotting the path, in finding patterns in this. And so if they think they know X and Y and they are puzzled about Z, AI can tell them, hey, you guys know X and Y. You know these assets, you know these systems, you know these things. What about this other part? And then humans will go figure it out and then report back to AI. I think that on the local context, make local context from the enterprise available to machines, machines themselves can help. And I've seen examples of that, at quote unquote day job, where some of the stuff that existed in people's heads evolved into digital realm and then evolved in the AI. And that really works well if you work hard on this. But it is a shocking position to be on the left from Daniel on AI optimism. I am kind of surprised
I didn't see that coming. Hey,
did not
Raja,
see this coming either.
To what Anton is just saying, I've heard you talk about the technology behind ExtraHop enough to hear that I don't think we needed, like what he was saying, I don't think we need AI for, right? I think that's just basic machine learning.
So look, AI is being used as a blanket for everything, right? The bottom line is machine learning is part of a discipline of AI. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about AI these days, we're talking about generative AI, specifically generative AI. But the entire family, machine learning is very much part of AI. And I think it's important that when we talk about what we're referring to over here in this podcast is a little bit less of machine learning and trend spotting and cleaning up signal, and more about the automation and more about using the massive amounts of data that we have in order to interpolate and make decisions that we don't have to reinvent the wheel for. That's what we're really talking about in terms of those use cases. And so I think we're really talking about generative AI. I don't think we're talking about machine learning over here, although there are parts where you couple machine learning with generative AI, you get a better result.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, real quick, Raf, I think the easy way to solve that question is you just define AI as tech that can do something that previously can only be done as a human. So machine learning does that, and AI does that. They are part of each other, parent and child. But, previously it was like no tech will ever identify a cat versus a dog. That was a thing that could only be done by a human. Then machine learning did it.
That's right.
Yeah, the Turing test, another thing. It just keeps moving. It keeps getting more advanced, but it's still all the same. The reason we're shocked by it is because previously only a human could do it, such as beating someone in chess.
So we've got some technology that can teach us things. One, help us identify patterns and knowledge from very large data sets. So I'm going to pose something to you guys, and maybe we can talk about this. So I've been thinking about kind of, Dan, some of your papers and reading unsupervised learning for a bit, kind of looking at it from the operations perspective. I think there's 5, I will say, aspirations and levers that we pull when it comes to increasing, when we say things are going to get better, right? So early on, it was velocity and volume, because that's the first thing we had to tackle, right? And I think SOAR was trying to solve that. As everybody got laptops and phones and cloud, the amount of signal and the raw data required us to process a volume of data at such a large pace at a velocity that a human simply couldn't do, right? We couldn't stare at logs anymore. And so we solved that by implementing all kinds of machine algorithms and SIMs and SOARs and all sorts of things. And we got reasonably good at velocity and volume. And then we realized that I think we were really crap at accuracy and precision, right? So while we could handle a lot of volume of data really, really fast, we were actually really bad at trying to figure out like which of these things was actually bad. And if like 4 analysts looked at this and for these data sets, whether they could all point to the same thing and say it was bad for the same reason. So we said, okay, AI, that's the solution AI is going to bring. And I believe, and I know this is getting better, but accuracy is getting better. Precision is not there. Or do I have it backwards?
No, you're right.
No, I think that's correct.
You're correct.
You're right.
Right. And so as we go from one large LLM to agents, right, which are very narrow, very task oriented on specific data sets, accuracy and precision are shooting up. What I think is still missing, right? I think is still maybe not missing. What I think is still troublesome for us to get is the last one. That to me, it's clarity, understanding what's actually going on, because it's the ability to prosecute a detection and say, yes, this is bad for this reason, and we should do this as a result. That's one entire thing. But then being able to say, but hold on, there are other things going on here that I'm going to then bring into the broader context, right? And say there's something bigger going on here than just this detection or this alert. It's this other series of activities. This identity was compromised. As a result, this data is at risk. By the way, this puts us in out of compliance with these sets of compliance regimes, blah, blah, blah. Do you guys agree?
You nailed it, but you nailed it. Actually, you had the answer in your question, right, in your statement. The answer is context. Right? So when you take a look at a model right now, you take a look at Quen, you say 35 billion parameter module, and you look at 105 billion parameter modules, and you've got 600 billion parameter modules in GLM 5.2. And so we're looking at all of these things, and everyone's talking about the number of models or the number of parameters. But the bottom line is, in order to make a model actually usable, it's not just the size of the number of parameters and the number of weights. You need a large amount of space for the context of the KV cache. And that's where innovation has really trailed. So Google came up with something called TurboQuant about a month back, which compressed the size of the KV cache, allowing you to have massive amounts of context. But yes, in order for us to use these models correctly, we have to have a huge KV cache so it can pull data and context from everywhere in the enterprise, correlate these threads together, and make a good decision based on the weights inside the model. And that's where people are not really following the plot quite as much, because everyone's focusing on the parameters, but not optimizing the retrieval and the context.
Erik, you've been really quiet. Can I pitch it over to you? Because I know you've run enough SOCs to know, to have someone input on this, but it scares me when you're too quiet.
It's interesting getting everyone's kind of perspectives from, kind of the more kind of data science side, the more kind of company perspective side, where, I'm the guy that's in the trenches every day, living the pain. And it's interesting to hear the conversation that goes on around, what needs to happen in order for these things to work or provide value. From my side, subtracting the AI here, like I've always had to try to come up with that value, out the gate without any of this new technology. And so, for those of us that have been doing this for a long time, like we've kind of had to figure this out already, with SOARs, with SIMs, with the tools we already have today, and make something, out of it that provides, value and outcomes to the companies. And so like one of the things I've found valuable was moving to kind of a headless SOC model, where you're not logging into tools or consoles, you're logging into like Jira, right, to get all your information. From that point of view, like you've had to have some process in place. You've had to have, for this event coming out, what data sources do I need to enrich it with in order to make sense out of it? So when it lands in a ticket, the person looking at it has all the information they need there to make a decision. So it kind of forces you to think about these problems up front as you're building the detection, as you're building the automation, as you're building the alerting. When I insert AI into this, like there's two perspectives I'm looking at it from. Is like, does it work? Obviously, if we're sitting around 80 or 90% accuracy, boot until you get to 5 nines. I don't want to hear from it, because that goes back to the time savings. Are you actually saving me time? If you give me 10 alerts and I know 8 of them are right, 2 of them are wrong, I have to look at all 10 to figure out which 2 are wrong, right? It's a really, really simple example.
Right, but it works well for 10. It fails for 10,000, right?
Yeah. At the same time, to the 10,000 scale, right? When we do need all the additional context for these models to go over these alerts, And I mean, the volume of alerts are massive, even at a company my size, or not talking even about, Google or Salesforce size, where you have, hundreds of thousands, millions of events per day. And if you need all this context in order for the LLM to make sense and tell you what's good and what's bad, how much is that going to cost you at the other end, right? So when I'm here, like we have, all the name brand tools, obviously, all the CNAPs and the SIMs and stuff like that. And if I were to go to my CFO tomorrow and say, hey, look, I know we're already spending, $10 million on the budget for all these tools, whatever it is, but I need another $2 million to put an AI tool on top to make them all work. I'm going to get laughed out of the room, right? And so that comes down to the other part of this and why it's so hard to adopt the AI here, especially when they're all using LLMs. They're expensive. And so when we were seeing the companies that are being successful out there that I've seen, like when I went to RSA and walked the floor and there's dozens of vendors there, the ones that are being successful, like I see them kind of following, it's kind of the model that Anton described when he had his talk at RSA. Where, are rules working just fine? Sure. Are automations working just fine? Sure. Not broken, why fix them? What are the things that aren't broken? And what are the things that we can't tackle with these tools today? Let's see if we can apply AI there. Will that help us solve these problems? Versus throwing it at everything. I mean, so there is a sense of, not only do you have to have a process set up so you understand what you're doing. I mean, you have to know what you're doing with the alerts. There's also the question of, does this make sense to apply to this problem? Just because you have a hammer, not everything's a nail. And so there's also that perspective that we look at it, from a practitioner point of view. When I'm walking the floor again, talking to the vendors, and they say we apply AI, we'll solve all your problems. That's cool. I don't want you to solve all my problems, right? I have a particular set of problems that are really hard, whether that's velocity of or volume of alerts or the complexity of them or whatever it is. I want to solve that problem for me and my team. And one of the questions I always ask, and again, I got this from Anton and Tim over there at Google, when they look at one of these solutions and, say you implement this thing and you're 90 days down the road, I want to come back and say, has this made my life better? How has this made my
better?
team's life?
What got better once you deployed it?
Yeah, what got better out of this? Yeah. And if they can't answer that question, or if you can't answer that question, you just got suckered. You're paying for something that has not materially raised the bar.
I've got a crazy idea here. What if the concept of a security program, actually this applies to a company, applies to any scale, Federation of Planets or whatever. What if prior to taking ownership, or you're elected to governor or emperor or whatever, you have to articulate your program in text? So check this out. You just describe exactly all the questions that you want to be asking and the answers that you would like to get back and the actions that you would take. So you build your entire program just clearly articulated in text and diagrams. That's all you get to use. You only get to use like Excalidraw and like Markdown or whatever. So you literally have a functional, you can say to anyone, to your customers, to your peers, to your management, whatever, this is my program. If I get this running, we will be good. You will be able to move quickly as a business and feel safe doing so. And then that is perfectly articulated. You have all the actions that you would take, all the follow-ups, all the triggers, all the alerts, all the detections. They're all clearly articulated in text. We haven't talked about any tech yet. We don't know if it's 1978, 1980s, doesn't matter.
Yep.
What is the program? Describe to me the program. And that, I think this is extraordinarily powerful because now you say, okay, it's 1979. Okay, all right, cool. We have a security team. It's a bunch of people. And we're actually, manually doing alerts. We're looking at network logs, right? We're looking at Cisco logs basically, and we're parsing them in some sort of way. I guess we have grep at that point. But what's cool about it is that same security program can move from 1979 all the way to 2039. Doesn't matter, no difference. That's the security program, is the text form of it. Now the real question is, here comes the crazy AI vendor. They're going to magically do everything for you. You show them the program. You're like, what do you do here? I'm doing this much of this program right now. I only have 38 people, so I can't do everything in my program that I would like to do. I'm doing about 14% because to really do this, I would need a giant team. And they're like, well, no, we could just solve it all amazing or whatever. It's like, okay, well, how much would that cost? Where does it run? Like, I have a bunch of questions about the implementation, but at least they're not able to just talk about, oh, I could do everything and amazing and blah, blah, blah. No, this is the program. This is what you have to like tell me you're able to accomplish.
That's the most sane take I think I've heard in a long time. All right. I know that we're getting close on time. So I want to give everybody a chance to kind of give us the 1 or 2 minute summary of where you think this is going inside the next 12 months. If we meet again in July of 2027, where can we be and where we might be? Those are probably going to be different. And so take a minute or two, and I'm going to start with you, Anton. You go first. In a year, where could we be?
Of course,
and where will we be?
Now I'm the guy with no prep time for the answer. Got it. Thanks, but for doing this. But yes, I know. I think in a year, a lot of people who are kind of laggards and who are still in the we don't understand what we are doing, but we just want to try it harder, would probably be incrementally where they are now. I feel like I need to split the answer into the leaders and the laggards. And I don't think in a year anything would change in the laggards. I feel like they would still continue to experiment with chatbots. Or they may not ban the chatbots anymore, as if they're in Europe. And they would be like, oh, wow, a chatbot, that's something new, right? So, but where the leaders be is what gets me excited. I think that the leaders will achieve even higher degrees of automation for some of the stuff we've spent years automating. So I am imagining the detection and response function at a top tier company. And again, I'm not naming names here. And I feel like even today's people may not recognize what's going on. Like I've seen some of the stuff we changed in a year in detection and response, and it's just enormously impressive. And I'm talking about the year past. A year forward will be more changes. So I feel like the chasm between leaders and laggards would just be kind of many dimensions away, not just many light years. This is my fear, is that in a year some of us would kind of be even more alien to the mainstream / laggard kind of org. This is my fear. Where can we be? Maybe the enlightenment would raise, and maybe there would be enough of the AI lifts all boats, not just the elite 0.1% boats. Sorry if my vision is a bit dark. Well, it's not dark, but it's dark for some.
I like it. All right, Daniel, your turn.
I think the separation that you're talking about there, Anton, is good. I think I would separate it based on the people who know themselves and know the tech. Most importantly, know themselves. I actually learned that from Eric Cole, RIP there. But yeah, know thyself, which I think he got from Sun Tzu. I feel like the biggest thing that needs to happen as part of AI is this transition from opaque to transparent. So do we actually deeply understand everything happening in our company? And I think within a year or two, companies are going to start dying because they are opaque and they're unable to articulate what they're about. Therefore, they're not able to use AI. Therefore, they will get lapped by people who have those things.
Okay. I get it. How about Erik? I'm gonna let you go next.
Sure. A year from now, I mean, I'm from a practitioner in the trenches point of view. I'm hoping that the use cases kind of shake themselves out, because now we're seeing people apply AI to all the things, right? They're throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And I'm hoping for us, a lot of those use cases that don't stick will be gone, and we'll have a much better idea or sense of what use cases we can apply this to and begin to apply them there effectively. At the same time, almost like we see the cloud today, where there are people that are just cloud native out of day one, and we see people that are still trying to figure out how they get there, in 20 years later. And to echo Anton and Daniel here, I think we're going to see the people that are AI native or AI early adopters or looking at the use cases at work, jumping on board with those, and we're going to have people that are just sitting in the back who 20 years from now will be asking themselves, how do I adopt AI? Just like we're seeing people ask today, how do I adopt the cloud? So,
Rock, I'm going to let you go next because you've been oddly silent. Except that you're on mute.
Hopefully a year from now, we've capitalized on the speed, right? Like the speed and the ability for AI to handle kind of that velocity and the veracity of data that organizations face in their SOCs, right? So hopefully a year from now, we've been able to kind of automate away that toil, right? We've invested in the enrichment of the data, in deduplication of the data, and the correlation in those first draft summaries. I think that's the genuine ROI that we'll end up seeing, but there's a real trap there because I still see people equating those faster first draft summaries to correctness. And if you look at the training data that a lot of these engines have been modeled off on, right? They're like real SOC data streams. They're like 99% benign, right? So a model that says all clear, right, could look brilliant right up until like the first wire transfer leaves the organization, right? Like we're so focused on accuracy and precision. And when we're talking to these vendors about these metrics that we don't talk about recall. Recall is the actual incident that was detected. And that's without recall, that's the attack you missed. And that is a separate machine learning discipline, right? Or metric. And so clarity here is going to be the real prize. And it's also the easiest thing to fake, right? Because generative AI does a really, really good job at taking a lot of dispersed data and giving you a really smooth sounding narrative around it. And, you know, if we think that we're just going to automate away those decisions, we're fooling ourselves.
All right. I like that. That's a good take. All right, Raj, I'm going to give you the final word on this. What are you thinking?
Yeah, look, I have some very specific predictions. So firstly, I think the first place where AI is going to disrupt the enterprise is around the way data is handled in the enterprise. Right now, we've got all these multiple SIEMs, you have multiple data lakes, you have all this, everything's like sort of living in various islands of dysfunctionality, if you will. And the way people have tried to solve this is by using tools for a data bus, consolidating the data, trying to figure out solutions with sovereignty. But you don't need to do that if you have AI. If you have AI and you have vector databases, you can cluster the database together. It lives where it lives, and you can use tools like RAG or what have you, Quadrant, and all these other vector databases to Pinecone to pull the information back together so that you can get better information to power your security responses. So first thing I think we're going to see is the change of data architecture specifically for SOCs, for security response, what have you, because AI makes it so much easier and so much more actionable. The next thing we're going to see is a primary change of the indexing of that data. It used to be by application, by SIEM, I use Splunk here, I use Oxford there, what have you. I think we're going to see the data being moved to being user-centric, user and identity-centric specifically. And all that plumbing has been laid down for years and years. We've seen federated identity. We've seen things like SAML. We've seen things like third-party cookies, what have you. Now they're going to be used not just for authentication, but for indexing of multiple behavioral patterns, which AI excels at doing. Because you can pull everything from all over the place, consolidate it, and figure out what's happening. And this is very, very heavyweight for a person to do, but it's much more streamlined and achievable for AI. So these are the two things I think we're going to see. We're going to see a disruption in data architecture, specifically around the SOC, and we're going to see much more identity-based indexing.
All right. Well, that's good. Jim, you want to add anything to that? Or I think I've got nothing after these guys. This has been fun. I like going from the theoretical, like, you know, what is the problem? What are we trying to solve? What's the theoretical issue? Then, like, how do we apply this stuff? Because I think we've all said it at some point today. For somebody that's a CISO that's in the enterprise, in Erik's seat, the challenge is, how do I actually solve problems with all this crap you guys are trying to sell me and trying to get me to buy into? And there's a lot of it. Some of it is really, really great, groundbreaking and earth-shatteringly cool. Some of it is just cool. And some of it is really, really old pigs with really shiny lipstick. And, it's hard to tell the difference, right? Simply because we don't actually know what good look. I'm convinced in cyber, we don't actually know what good looks like. We know which direction it's in, but we don't know what it looks like, because we've been going back and forth on the chat here about the fact, and I think Jim pointed out early on, is like, hey, we don't actually know the fundamentals really well. So to then go build tools on top of poor fundamentals is probably a bad idea, right? But if maybe AI is to the point where it's like, hey, by the way, there's an asset you didn't know about over here. Let me show it to you. By the way, it's been doing these bad things, and here's why, and here's what, and here's what to do next. That may actually solve something, because like we keep putting, the paper towel tube up to our eyeballs and like saying, I can solve this. And you look over here and go, new problem, I can solve this, but it's the same elephant. And on that, I think I'm going to close it out. You guys, it's been great having you aboard. Thanks so much for everybody's time. I know this is an hour out of your day. I actually probably want to do this again at some point, because this stuff changes fast enough, and there's enough interesting stuff in it that we might get this crew together. Hopefully Anton won't be held hostage by a autonomous driving vehicle in a parking lot somewhere. Or I don't know. Actually, I have no idea where he's going. But anyway, guys, Daniel, Jim, Rock, Raja, Erik, and even Anton, thanks for joining us. You guys that are listening, hope you caught the video. Hope you get a chance to listen to the podcast at least once. This is going to be a real doozy to come back to, especially in like 6 months, to see, are we right? Do any of us have any idea what we're talking about?
Not at all.
And I guess on that note, I'm going to end it and say thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys another time, another place, on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. It's a pleasure. We'll see you again. Bye-bye. Thanks.
This is Bella. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave my dad a review and share this with your friends. Bye.